Hi, I'm Paul Barnett, founder of the Enlightened Enterprise Academy, and in this series of recordings, I'll be introducing the better way, Enlightened Enterprise. Over the course of 12 months or so, I'll be writing the book, but during that time, I want to organise a number of online live dialogues with guests and with live audiences to explore the themes. In this particular recording, I'll make the case that we're on a path to mutually assured destruction and that the pioneers of enlightened enterprises will be the ones that get us onto the path to mutually assured flourishing. I'll start by asking how momentous are the challenges we face and how big are the changes we need to make. The Long Waves in Economic Life, published in 1925 by a Russian economist, introduced the idea that capitalist economies experience long waves of economic expansion and contraction, experienced as 40 to 60-year cycles, or waves as he preferred to call them, also known as K waves. The first wave, spring, is a period of innovation and expansion, as new technology triggers economic growth. The second wave, summer, is a period of boom and inflation. Economic prosperity peaks, investments increase, but inflation begins to rise. The third wave, autumn, is a period of stagnation and saturation. Growth slows, speculative bubbles form, and financial instability emerges. In the fourth wave, winter, recession and depression are features. The economy contracts, crises occur, and old industries decline, making way for the next cycle. The long waves of economic life theory, whilst not universally accepted, suggested that technology and innovation drive long-term economic trends, and that each wave leads to major transformations in industries and also in societies. It therefore usefully illustrates the link between structural and social trends. The Wall Street crash that led to the Great Depression is an example of the end of an economic cycle. The ancient Romans had an idea of a different type of cycle, a cycle covering the length of time from the birth of one generation to the passing of the last person from that generation. The concept was popularized in modern times by historians William Strauss and Neil Howe in The Fourth Turning. Their generational theory is that history moves in cycles of roughly 80 to 100 years, broken into four generational turnings of about 20 to 25 years each. Those turnings include the high period, a period of strong institutions, collective confidence, and conformity following a major crisis. The second turning is the awakening, a time of cultural and spiritual upheaval where people question authority and seek greater personal and social transformation. Institutions come under attack and individualism rises. The third turning is the unravelling. Institutions weaken, civic life declines, and society becomes more fragmented. Individualism dominates, and trust in leadership erodes. Then the fourth cycle, or fourth turning, is the crisis, a period of major upheaval, often involving wars, revolution, or economic collapse. Institutions are torn down and rebuilt, leading to new social orders. The fourth turning framework primarily focuses on generational cycles of social attitudes rather than directly addressing the deeper structural issues of governance failures, technological disruptions, economic crises, or planetary limits. The collapse of the Soviet Union, symbolized by the fall of the Berlin Wall, might be seen as an example of a fourth turning. By recognizing that 2 or 3 K waves are likely to happen in a generational cycle, and the structural and social issues are interrelated and interdependent, we can better understand how societies evolve. 25 years after the publication of The Fourth Turning, Neil Howe updated the book with the publication of The Fourth Turning is Here, suggesting that we're now already in the crisis stage. Personally, I don't think we're at the crisis stage. I think we're between stages 3 and 4, between unravelling and crisis. More importantly, I don't believe that we're only at the end of a generational cycle. I think that we're at the end of what I would call an epochal cycle, at the end of an epoch. Unlike long-wave economic cycles and generational cycles that are both measured in decades, epochal cycles are measured in centuries. The epochal cycles of the past can be seen in this timeline. The Industrial Revolution that replaced the agricultural economy is an example of an epochal cycle. And a fourth type of cycle is the age cycle, measured in millennia. They include many generational cycles and even more economic cycles. These are some of the age cycles you may be familiar with. So what kind of cycle are we in now? And is it coming to an end, as I suggest? And what will it be replaced by? In my view, we're not just at the end of the fourth turning of a generational cycle, we're at the end of an epoch. The epoch that I think we're at the end of is the Enlightenment Epoch. We've been living in the Enlightenment Epoch for over 3 centuries. During that time, we've seen many economic cycles and generational cycles. The timeline illustrates some of them, including the digital revolution that began in our lifetime. During the Enlightenment Epoch, human progress has been spectacular. Scientific and technological breakthroughs of the Enlightenment provided the spark that ignited the Industrial Revolution. Before the late 1800s and early 1900s, humanity saw almost no improvement in economic development from one century to the next. But the Enlightenment didn't get everything right. It overlooked many important issues and couldn't have foreseen many others. Its failings are the root cause of many of our biggest 21st century challenges. Perhaps the biggest failing was a mechanistic worldview, treating nature as a machine. Seeing humans as separate from nature and superior to nature, thinkers like Francis Bacon argued that scientific progress could conquer and subdue nature, for example. This reinforced the idea that nature existed primarily for human use, a mindset that contributed to issues captured in the most famous photographs of Sebastian Salgado, the extraction of natural resources being one example, deforestation being another. Additional direct and indirect consequences of such an attitude to nature and the environment include climate change related to the burning of fossil fuels and mass migration caused by natural environment destruction. More recent examples of the problems include the massive increase in wildfires and other climate-related disasters, and the melting of the ice caps, resulting in the loss of natural habitats and rising sea levels. In many ways, the Industrial Revolution was also dehumanizing. as Adam Smith predicted it would be. Man ended up becoming in service to machine, as depicted by Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times. Child labour and sweatshops, one of the worst social consequences, remain a scourge. And capitalism, which created great wealth, also produced great inequalities in wealth, which have become even more extreme during the era of neoliberal economics. 3 centuries old, Enlightenment thinking is deeply rooted in the way we view the world, and we're barely conscious of the fact, especially in the West. And how we think drives how we behave. Without being conscious of what's driving our thinking, we tend to operate on autopilot. As a consequence, we find ourselves having to deal with a metacrisis, polycrisis, or permacrisis, as people variously call the situation we are confronted with today. Signs that we're at the end of an epoch, not only a fourth turning and the end of a generational cycle. Not yet convinced? Well, let's explore those themes some more. The term metacrisis refers to the interconnected, systemic nature of the crises facing humanity, including climate change, economic instability, political polarization, technological disruptions, and often existential risks. Unlike individual crises, which can often be addressed in isolation, the meta-crisis highlights how these challenges are deeply interwoven and reinforce one another in ways that make solutions more complex. The meta-crisis is rooted in deeper issues such as flawed thinking about human progress, unsustainable economic models, and a disconnection between ecological and social realities. The term polycrisis refers to overlapping crises which interact in unpredictable ways and compound one another, amplifying their overall impact. Unlike isolated crises, a polycrisis involves distinct yet interconnected challenges such as economic instability, geopolitical conflicts, climate change, and technological disruptions colliding simultaneously, making them harder to manage. The key feature of a polycrisis is that the whole is worse than the sum of the parts. The interplay between the crises creates feedback loops that intensify risk and reduce the effectiveness of traditional problem-solving approaches. The term permacrisis refers to an extended period of persistent instability and uncertainty where multiple crises, such as economic turmoil, political upheaval, climate disasters, and social disruption, occur continuously or in rapid succession, creating a sense of enduring crisis. Unlike short-term emergencies, a permacrisis suggests a new normal in which society struggles to recover before the next crisis emerges. This sustained state of turbulence can lead to collective anxiety, institutional fatigue, and difficulty in long-term planning. Addressing a permacrisis requires adaptive governance, resilience strategies, and a shift from crisis management to proactive systemic transformation. These terms may all sound quite similar. They do because they share similar features. So let's summarize what the main differences are. There are three main differences. The first refers to the depth and duration. A metacrisis is the deepest, focusing on the foundational issues. A polycrisis is about multiple crises interacting at a given moment in time. And a permacrisis is about the persistence of crisis over time. The second main difference is the systemic v surface level nature of the different terms. Metacrises look at the root causes, such as worldviews and systems failures. Polycrises look at how crises interconnect. And permacrisis describes the prolonged state of instability without necessarily analysing interconnections. The third main difference is regarding the framing of responses. A metacrisis calls for deep systemic transformation. A polycrisis requires coordinated, multidimensional solutions, whilst a permacrisis demands resilience and adaptation to ongoing shocks. Each one of the different terms and what it means provides some useful insights, but most importantly, I think collectively, they provide evidence that we're at the end of the Enlightenment epoch and at the beginning of a new epoch. The Enlightenment epoch is coming to an end, triggered by multiple independent crises that individually and collectively represent existential risks to humanity. Our systems are failing, and the root causes are to be found in the dominant worldviews which date from the First Enlightenment. Those views cause some of the problems that we now face, and they're unable to help us address today's challenges. I believe we need to transcend to a new epoch, and I'm calling it the New Enlightenment. Addressing our 21st century challenges will require us to leave the path that we're currently on, the path to mutually assured destruction. Instead, we must choose a different path, the path to mutually assured flourishing. In other words, we're at an inflection point. Inflection is the name of a series of interviews that I've been conducting for the Enlightened Enterprise Academy's salon. Like the Paris salons of the 1800s, we aim to catalyse an enlightenment, the new enlightenment. A systemic approach to changing, transforming, and transcending the worldviews that we currently have and our related behaviours is urgently needed, especially the way in which we view our relationship with nature and our environment. Enlightened enterprise requires that we stop acting on autopilot, that we become conscious of where our worldviews come from and how they drive our current behaviours. We need to reflect on how appropriate those worldviews are for the 21st century, and we need to be willing to change, transform, or transcend as necessary. I hope this first recording has been thought-provoking. All the recordings in the series will be explored in online dialogues with special guests and subscribers to the Better Way initiative. So why not join us on the journey? Support us by subscribing and make sure you don't miss the next step. You might also like to join the Enlightened Enterprise Academy. You'll then get free access to this publication and every other publication and initiative that we launch, plus other benefits, including access to programs, workshops, retreats, and so on. Thanks for watching.